The wedding dress hung in Florence Newbury's bedroom like a ghost, white lace catching the late afternoon sunlight that filtered through the dusty curtains of her father's ranch house in Gonzales, Texas. And she wondered if a person could die from marrying the wrong man. It was June 1878, and the heat pressed down on everything like a heavy hand. Florence stood at her window, watching the cattle move slowly across the distant fields, their bodies creating small clouds of dust with every step. She was 22 years old, and in 3 days she would become Mrs. Wallace Hartford, wife to the wealthiest rancher in Gonzales County. Her father had arranged it all 6 months ago, shaking hands with Wallace over whiskey in the parlor while Florence served them coffee and kept her eyes on the floor. Wallace Hartford was 46 years old, a widower with cold gray eyes and a mouth that never smiled. He owned 3,000 acres and had more money than most people in Texas could dream of, but Florence had seen the way he looked at his ranch hands when they made mistakes. She had seen the bruises on his late wife's arms at church, years ago, before the woman died of what the doctor called a fever but what the town whispered was a broken spirit. "Florence, come help me with supper," her mother called from downstairs. Florence turned from the window, smoothing down her simple cotton dress. Her reflection caught in the small mirror by her wash basin. Dark auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun, green eyes that her grandmother used to say were the color of spring grass, and a face that people called pretty, but that she barely recognized anymore. She felt like she was disappearing a little more each day, fading into the inevitability of her future. Downstairs, her mother was already at the stove, stirring a pot of beans. Margaret Newbury was a thin woman who had once been beautiful but now looked worn down by years of hard work and harder luck. Florence's father, Thomas, had lost most of his cattle to disease 2 years ago, and they had been struggling ever since. Wallace's offer to marry Florence had come with a substantial payment to her father and a promise to help rebuild the Newbury herd. "Are you excited about the wedding?" her mother asked, not looking up from the pot. Florence picked up a knife and started cutting cornbread. "I suppose. Wallace is a good match. You will want for nothing. Except everything that matters." Her mother's hand stilled on the wooden spoon. "Florence, we have discussed this. Your father and I need this alliance. Without Wallace's help, we will lose everything. You want us to end up on the street." "No, Mama." "Then smile and be grateful. Many girls would be thrilled to marry a man of Wallace's standing." Florence said nothing. What could she say that had not already been said 100 times? Her feelings did not matter. Her dreams of marrying for love, of finding someone who would look at her like she was the sun and the moon, of building a life with a partner instead of a master. None of it mattered compared to cattle and land and money. That evening, after supper was cleared and her parents had gone to bed, Florence sat on the porch and watched the stars. The night air was still warm, carrying the scent of sage and mesquite. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. She thought about running away, just saddling her horse and riding into the darkness, but where would she go? A woman alone with no money and no prospects would not last long. The world was not kind to women who tried to make their own way. The next morning, Wallace came calling. He arrived in his fancy buggy, pulled by 2 matching bay horses that probably cost more than Florence's entire wardrobe. He was a tall man, broad-shouldered and imposing, with dark hair graying at the temples and a thick mustache. He wore expensive clothes and carried himself like someone who expected the world to bend to his will. "Miss Newbury," he said, tipping his hat. His voice was deep and commanding. "I trust you are preparing well for our nuptials." "Yes, sir," Florence said, because that was what he expected. "I have brought you a gift." He handed her a velvet box. Inside was a necklace of pearls, beautiful and delicate. "These belong to my mother. I expect you to wear them on our wedding day." "Thank you, they are lovely." He stepped closer, and Florence fought the urge to step back. "You will make a fine wife, Florence. Obedient and pleasing, that is all I require. Not a partner, not an equal, just obedient and pleasing." Florence's throat tightened, but she nodded. After Wallace left, Florence's father clapped her on the shoulder. "You did well, daughter. Just 2 more days and our fortunes will turn around." 2 more days. 48 hours until her life became a cage. The following afternoon, Florence rode into town to pick up some final supplies for the wedding. Gonzales was a small town, just a main street with a general store, a saloon, a church, and a handful of other buildings. The summer heat made the wooden sidewalks almost too hot to walk on, and most people were staying in the shade. Florence was coming out of the general store, her arms full of packages, when she collided with someone. The packages tumbled to the ground, and strong hands caught her arms, steadying her. "Whoa there, miss. Are you all right?" Florence looked up into the bluest eyes she had ever seen. The man was young, probably 25 or 26, with sun-bronzed skin and light brown hair that curled slightly at his collar. He wore worn denim pants, a faded blue shirt, and a leather vest. A cowboy, clearly, probably just passing through town. But there was something in his eyes, a warmth and genuine concern that made her heart skip. "I am fine, thank you," she managed. "Let me help you with these." He bent down and started gathering the scattered packages. His movements were quick and efficient, and Florence noticed the way his muscles moved under his shirt, the easy grace of someone comfortable in his own body. "That is kind of you," Florence said, kneeling to help. "No trouble at all." He handed her the packages, and their fingers brushed. Florence felt a jolt of something she could not name. "I am Samuel Sterling. Just arrived in town this morning. Florence Newbury. Pleased to meet you, Miss Newbury." His smile was genuine, reaching his eyes and crinkling the corners. When was the last time Wallace had smiled at her like that? "Never. You live around here." "My father has a ranch just outside town. Beautiful country. I have been traveling through Texas looking for work. Heard there might be some ranches hiring." Before Florence could respond, a sharp voice cut through the air. "Florence." She turned to see Wallace striding toward them, his face dark with displeasure. Samuel stood up, his easy smile fading as he took in the older man's aggressive approach. "Mr. Hartford," Florence said, her stomach sinking. "Who is this?" Wallace demanded, looking at Samuel like he was something unpleasant on the bottom of his boot. "Samuel Sterling, sir," Samuel said, extending his hand. "Just helping the lady with her packages." Wallace ignored the offered hand. "My fiancé does not require help from drifters." He took Florence's arm, his grip tight enough to hurt. "Come along, Florence." "Wait," Samuel said, and something in his voice made Wallace stop. "Did you hurt her? What I do with my fiancé is none of your concern." Samuel's eyes flicked to where Wallace's hand gripped Florence's arm, and his jaw tightened. "Seems to me like you are hurting her right now. Seems to me like you should mind your own business before you find yourself in trouble." The air between the two men crackled with tension. People on the street were starting to notice, stopping to watch. Florence knew this could turn ugly fast. "It is fine," she said quickly, looking at Samuel. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Sterling." Samuel held her gaze for a long moment, and Florence saw something there, a question, a concern, a connection that made her breath catch. Then Wallace pulled her away, practically dragging her toward his buggy. "You will not speak to strange men," Wallace hissed as he shoved her into the buggy. "Do you understand? You are to become my wife, and I will not have you embarrassing me." "I was just picking up packages," he was being polite. "I do not care. You will speak only to people I approve of. You will go only where I allow you to go. Once we are married, you will learn your place." Fear and anger warred in Florence's chest. "And what place is that?" Wallace's hand shot out and grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. His fingers dug into her skin. "You will learn not to question me. My first wife had a sharp tongue too until I taught her better." He released her and picked up the reins. As the buggy rolled forward, Florence looked back to see Samuel still standing on the sidewalk, watching them with an expression of deep concern. Their eyes met across the distance, and something passed between them, something Florence could not name but felt in her bones. That night, Florence could not sleep. She kept thinking about Samuel Sterling, about his kind eyes and his genuine concern. She kept thinking about the way he had asked if she was all right, like her well-being actually mattered. And she kept thinking about Wallace's words, his threat about teaching her, like his first wife. The wedding was tomorrow. In less than 24 hours, she would be Mrs. Wallace Hartford, bound by law and God to a man who saw her as property. Florence got out of bed and lit a candle. She pulled out the small journal she kept hidden under her mattress and wrote down everything she was feeling. The fear, the anger, the sense of being trapped. And she wrote about Samuel, about the way he had looked at her, about the spark of something she had never felt before. When she finally blew out the candle and lay back down, the sky was starting to lighten with dawn. Her wedding day had arrived. The house was chaos all morning. Her mother fussing over every detail, her father pacing nervously, the local women who had come to help Florence dress. The white lace dress slipped over her head and suddenly Florence could not breathe. The corset was too tight, the dress too heavy, the room too small. "I cannot do this," she gasped. "Nonsense," her mother said, adjusting the pearls around Florence's neck. "You are just nervous. Every bride feels this way." "No, I mean I cannot marry him. Mama, please. He is cruel. He threatened me yesterday." Her mother's face hardened. "Florence Margaret Newbury, you will stop this foolishness right now. The guests are already arriving at the church. The reverend is waiting. Wallace has already paid your father. This wedding is happening." "But what about what I want, what you want?" Her mother's laugh was bitter. "Since when do women get what they want? We do our duty. We take care of our families. We survive. Now hold still while I fix your veil." Florence felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she blinked them back. Crying would not change anything. Nothing would change anything. The ride to the church felt like a funeral procession. Florence sat in the wagon between her parents, the white dress spread around her like a shroud. The church bells were ringing, calling everyone to witness her doom. People lined the walkway to the church, smiling and congratulating her. Florence moved like a ghost through them, her feet carrying her forward even though everything in her screamed to run. At the church doors, her father took her arm. "You look beautiful, daughter. You are doing a good thing for this family. I am proud of you." Proud that she was sacrificing herself. Proud that she was marrying a man who would hurt her. Florence wanted to scream, but her throat was too tight. The church doors opened. The congregation stood. Florence could see Wallace at the altar, dressed in a black suit, his face impassive. Beside him was his ranch foreman, serving as his best man. The reverend held his Bible, waiting. Florence's father started walking her down the aisle. Each step felt like wading through mud. Her vision blurred at the edges. She could hear her heartbeat pounding in her ears, drowning out the sound of the organ. They were halfway down the aisle when the church doors burst open behind them. "Wait." Everyone turned. Florence's heart leaped into her throat. Samuel Sterling stood in the doorway, dusty from the road, his hat in his hands. He looked at Florence, only at Florence, and his blue eyes were intense. "What is the meaning of this?" the reverend demanded. Samuel walked down the aisle, his boots loud on the wooden floor. He stopped a few feet from Florence. "I apologize for the interruption, Reverend, but I have something to say." "This is completely inappropriate," Wallace snarled. "Someone remove this man." "No," Samuel said firmly. He looked at Florence, and the rest of the church seemed to fade away. "I am sorry. I know I have no right. I know we only met yesterday, but I spent all last night thinking about you, about the fear I saw in your eyes when that man grabbed you." Florence's breath caught. Around them, the congregation was starting to murmur. "I have been traveling for 2 years," Samuel continued, speaking directly to Florence like they were the only two people in the world. "I have seen a lot of country, met a lot of people. I have never believed in love at first sight. I thought it was something people made up for romantic stories. But yesterday, when I looked into your eyes, I felt something I have never felt before. And when I saw him hurt you, saw the way you looked so trapped and afraid, I knew I could not just ride on and forget you." "How dare you?" Wallace started, but Samuel ignored him. "I rode out to your father's ranch last night. I talked to some of the ranch hands in town. I heard things about Mr. Hartford that made my blood run cold, things about his first wife, things about how he treats people." Samuel took a step closer to Florence. "So I am asking you, and I know I have no right, but I am asking anyway. Is this what you want? Do you want to marry this man?" The church was dead silent. Florence could feel hundreds of eyes on her, waiting. Her father's hand tightened on her arm. Her mother looked horrified. Wallace looked murderous, but Samuel just looked concerned and hopeful and like he genuinely cared about her answer. "What do you want, Florence?" Samuel asked softly. The question broke something open inside her. What did she want? When had anyone ever asked her that? When had anyone ever cared? "I do not know you," Florence whispered. "No, you do not. But I am offering you a choice. Marry him and I will walk away, or take a chance on something unknown. I cannot promise you anything except that I will never hurt you, never force you to do anything against your will, and I will spend every day trying to earn your trust and affection." "This is ridiculous," Wallace said. "Florence, come here now." "Do not order her around," Samuel said, his voice hardening. "She is not your property. She is my fiancée. We have a legal arrangement, an arrangement between you and her father. Did anyone ask her what she wanted?" Florence looked at Wallace, at his cold eyes and tight mouth, at the future of fear and pain that awaited her. Then she looked at Samuel, at this stranger who had ridden into town and turned her world upside down in 24 hours. It was insane. It was reckless. But the question echoed in her mind. "What do you want?" "I do not want this," Florence said, her voice barely audible. "What?" her father said. "I do not want this," Florence repeated louder. She pulled her arm free from her father's grip. "I do not want to marry Wallace Hartford." The church erupted in shocked gasps and whispers. Wallace's face turned red with rage. "You ungrateful little wretch! After everything I have done for your pathetic family." "You bought me like cattle," Florence said, and the words felt like freedom. "You threatened me. You hurt me. You planned to break me like you broke your first wife. I would rather die than marry you." "Florence, think about what you are doing," her mother pleaded. "You are ruining us." "I am saving myself." Florence turned to Samuel. Her hands were shaking, her heart was racing, but for the first time in months she felt like she could breathe. "I do not know you. I do not know if this is crazy or brave or just stupid. But yes, yes, I will take a chance on something unknown." Samuel's face broke into a brilliant smile. He held out his hand and Florence took it. His palm was warm and calloused, and his fingers closed around hers with gentle strength. "We cannot let them leave," Wallace said to the crowd. "I paid good money for that girl. Someone stop them." "She is not property," Samuel said firmly. and any man who tries to stop us will have to go through me." Florence's father stepped forward. "You have destroyed us. Wallace was going to save our ranch." "I am sorry, Papa," Florence said, and she meant it. "But I cannot sacrifice my life for land. I cannot marry a man who would hurt me. Please try to understand." Her father's face crumbled, and for a moment Florence saw not anger but genuine pain. "Get out. You are no daughter of mine." The words hit like a physical blow, but Samuel squeezed her hand. "Come on." They ran down the aisle together, Florence's white dress flying behind her. The congregation parted for them, some looking scandalized, others looking almost admiring. As they burst out of the church into the bright summer sunlight, Florence heard Wallace bellowing behind them, but Samuel was already pulling her toward a horse tied at the hitching post. "Can you ride in that dress?" he asked. "I can do anything in this dress," Florence said recklessly. Samuel laughed and swung up into the saddle, then pulled Florence up behind him. She wrapped her arms around his waist, feeling the solid strength of him, and then they were galloping down the main street of Gonzales, leaving chaos and her old life behind. They rode hard for an hour, putting distance between themselves and the town. Florence clung to Samuel, her face pressed against his back, her heart pounding with fear and exhilaration. What had she done? She had thrown away her family, her home, everything she knew. For what? For a stranger. For a man she had met yesterday. But when she thought about the alternative, about Wallace's cruel eyes and threatening words, she knew she had made the right choice. Whatever happened now, at least it was her choice. Finally, Samuel slowed the horse near a creek lined with cottonwood trees. He dismounted and helped Florence down. Her legs were shaky, and the heavy wedding dress was covered in dust. "Are you all right?" Samuel asked, studying her face with concern. Florence started to answer, then found herself laughing. It started as a giggle and grew into full-bodied laughter that shook her whole frame. Samuel looked confused at first, then started laughing too. "I just ran away from my wedding," Florence gasped between laughs. "I just left my entire family in town. This is the craziest thing I have ever done." "Are you regretting it already?" Florence looked at him, really looked at him. He was handsome, yes, but more than that, there was kindness in his face, honesty. He had asked her what she wanted. "No, I am terrified, but I am not regretting it." Samuel's smile was warm and relieved. "Good. Because I have no plan whatsoever beyond getting you away from that man." "No plan?" "I am not exactly a wealthy man, Florence. I have my horse, my saddle, about $50 to my name, and the clothes on my back. I have been working odd jobs on ranches across Texas, moving from place to place. I saw an advertisement about a ranch hiring outside of San Antonio, and I was planning to head that direction." He ran a hand through his hair, looking suddenly uncertain. "I realize I just convinced you to run away with a drifter who has nothing to offer you." "You offered me a choice," Florence said softly. "That is more than anyone else has given me in a long time." They stood by the creek, looking at each other. Now that the adrenaline was fading, Florence was becoming aware of how insane this situation was. She was alone with a man she barely knew, wearing a wedding dress in the middle of nowhere. She should be terrified. But instead, she felt more alive than she had in years. "We should talk about what happens next," Samuel said. "I do not want you to think I expect anything from you. I know this is all very sudden and strange, but I meant what I said in the church. I will never hurt you or force you to do anything. We can travel to San Antonio together if you want. I can help you find respectable work there, or you could stay with my sister. She lives there with her husband." "You have a sister, Sarah. She is 2 years older than me. Her husband owns a small mercantile. They would take you in, give you a place to stay until you figure out what you want to do." Florence felt something loosen in her chest. He was already thinking about her well-being, already offering her options. That is kind, but what about you? What about what you said in the church? Samuel's ears turned slightly pink. I meant every word, but I also recognized that I might have gotten caught up in the moment. You do not know me, and I do not know you. I would like to know you, Florence. I would like the chance to court you properly if you are willing. But I also understand if you want to go your separate way once we reach San Antonio. What made you do it? Florence asked. What made you come to the church? You could have just ridden on. You did not owe me anything. Samuel was quiet for a moment, looking out at the creek. My mother, he finally said. She married my father when she was 18. He was not a good man. He drank, he gambled, he had a temper. She stayed with him because she thought she had no choice, because that is what women were told to do. She died when I was 20, and I think part of her had been dead long before that, just worn down by years of living with a man who treated her badly. He looked back at Florence. When I saw the fear in your eyes yesterday when I heard about Hartford's reputation, I saw my mother. And I thought, what if someone had given her a choice? What if someone had asked her what she wanted? Maybe she would still be alive. Florence felt tears pricking her eyes. I am sorry about your mother. Me too. But maybe I can make her death mean something by making sure another woman does not suffer the same fate. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the creek babble and the cicadas sing in the trees. Then Florence's stomach growled loudly and they both laughed. When did you last eat? Samuel asked. Yesterday. I was too nervous this morning. Well, we should fix that. I have some supplies in my saddlebag. Nothing fancy, but it will keep us going until we can get to a town. Samuel unpacked some jerky, hardtack, and a canteen of water. They sat in the shade of a cottonwood tree, and Florence ate ravenously. The food was simple and plain, but it was the best meal she could remember having in a long time. Maybe because she was eating it as a free woman. Tell me about yourself, Florence said. If we are going to travel together, I should know more than your name. Samuel leaned back against the tree trunk. Not much to tell, really. I am 25 years old, born and raised in Tennessee. My father died when I was 21, and after my mother passed a year later, there was nothing keeping me there. My sister Sarah had already married and moved to Texas, so I decided to see what the West was like. I have been working ranches for the past 2 years, learning the trade. I am good with horses, decent with cattle, and I can shoot straight when needed. I do not drink much, I do not gamble, and I try to treat people decent. He smiled. See, not very exciting. It sounds good to me, Florence said. Honest work and honest living. That is better than all of Wallace's money and land. Your turn. Tell me about Florence Newbury. Florence picked at the lace on her dress. I am 22. I have lived in Gonzales my whole life. My father raises cattle, or used to before disease wiped out most of the herd. My mother keeps house. I have no brothers or sisters. I learned to read and write, which not all girls around here do. I like to ride horses and read books and look at the stars. I always thought I would marry someone I loved, build a life together, maybe have children. She laughed bitterly. Instead, I almost became Wallace Hartford's second wife and probably would have ended up like his first, dead before my time. That is not going to happen, Samuel said firmly. You are free now. You can decide your own future. Can I have no money, no skills beyond housework and ranching. What kind of future can a woman like me have? Any kind you want. You could work in a shop, become a teacher, start your own business. San Antonio is growing fast. There are opportunities there for people willing to work hard. Florence looked at him, at this optimistic stranger who seemed to genuinely believe she could make her own way. You really think so? I know so. My sister Sarah works in her husband's store, keeping the books and managing inventory. She says she is better at business than he is. And I have met women running boarding houses, working as seamstresses, even one who owned a small ranch by herself. The world is changing, Florence. Maybe not as fast as it should, but it is changing. They talked as the afternoon wore on, sharing stories and learning about each other. Florence discovered that Samuel had a dry sense of humor and a thoughtful way of looking at the world. He told her about working cattle drives, about sleeping under the stars and facing down storms and stampedes. He made it sound like an adventure instead of just hard work. Florence told him about her childhood, about learning to ride when she was 5 years old, about the books her grandmother had left her that she had read over and over. She told him about her dreams of seeing more than just Gonzales, of traveling to cities like San Antonio and Austin and maybe even New Orleans someday. As the sun started to set, Samuel stood and dusted off his pants. "We should keep moving. Hartford might send men after us, and I want to put more distance between us and Gonzales before we camp for the night." Florence looked down at her wedding dress. "I cannot ride all the way to San Antonio in this thing. You have anything else?" "No. I was supposed to go from the church to Wallace's ranch. All my other clothes are at my father's house." Samuel thought for a moment. "We will have to stop in the next town and get you some practical clothes. I know that will eat into my money, but we cannot have you traveling in a ball gown." "Wedding dress," Florence corrected with a smile. "Right. Wedding dress you never got to use for its intended purpose." They rode on as the sky turned orange and pink, following the creek south. Samuel kept them moving at a steady pace, not pushing the horse too hard but keeping them going. Florence's arms were wrapped around his waist, and she found herself noticing things about him. The way he sat straight in the saddle, confident and capable. The way he hummed softly to himself, some tune she did not recognize. The way he smelled like leather and horses and something else, something uniquely him. When it got too dark to travel safely, Samuel found them a sheltered spot in a grove of live oaks. He helped Florence down from the horse and immediately started gathering wood for a fire. "You should rest," he said. "You have had quite a day." "So have you. Let me help." They worked together to build a fire and set up a simple camp. Samuel had a bedroll and a saddle blanket which he insisted Florence take. "Where will you sleep?" she asked. "I will be fine by the fire. I have slept on the ground plenty of times." "Samuel, I cannot take your only blanket. You are wearing a lace dress in the middle of the Texas wilderness. You need it more than I do." Florence could not argue with that logic. She wrapped herself in the blanket and lay down near the fire, using Samuel's saddle as a pillow. The ground was hard and the night sounds were loud, crickets and frogs and the occasional hoot of an owl. But she felt safer than she had in months. Samuel sat by the fire, keeping watch. Florence watched him through half-closed eyes, this stranger who had changed her life. He had a strong profile and the firelight played across his features, making him look almost otherworldly. "Samuel," she said softly. "Yes, thank you for today, for asking me what I wanted. No one has ever done that before." He looked over at her, and his smile was gentle. "Everyone deserves to be asked what they want. Sleep now. We have a long ride ahead of us tomorrow." Florence closed her eyes and, surprisingly, fell asleep almost immediately. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was the fact that for the first time in months she was not dreading tomorrow. She woke to the smell of coffee. Samuel had a small pot heating over the fire and the sun was just starting to rise. "Morning," he said cheerfully. "Coffee, please." They shared the tin cup, passing it back and forth, and ate more jerky for breakfast. It was not the lavish meal Florence would have had at her wedding reception, but she would not trade it for anything. They rode all day, stopping only to water the horse and rest briefly. The country was beautiful, rolling hills covered in grass and wildflowers, stands of mesquite and oak trees providing occasional shade. They passed other travelers on the road, and Florence kept her head down, worried that someone might recognize her. But most people just nodded or tipped their hats and kept moving. By late afternoon, they reached a small town called Belmont. It was barely more than a crossroads, but it had a general store and a livery stable. "Stay here," Samuel said, helping Florence down in an alley behind the store. "I will get you some clothes." "What size do you wear?" Florence told him, and he disappeared into the store. She waited nervously, constantly looking around for any sign of pursuit. Every time someone rode past, her heart jumped. What if Wallace had sent men after them? What if her father had alerted the law? She was not sure if what she had done was illegal, but it certainly was not going to make her popular. Samuel returned with a bundle wrapped in brown paper. "Here. There is a small room in the livery where you can change. The owner said you could use it." Florence took the bundle and hurried to the livery. Inside the small tack room, she unwrapped the paper to find a simple cotton dress, a shawl, and even some undergarments. Samuel had been surprisingly thoughtful about what she would need. She quickly stripped off the wedding dress, unlacing the corset with relief. It felt like taking off chains. The cotton dress was plain blue calico, nothing fancy, but it fit reasonably well and was much more practical for traveling. Florence bundled up the wedding dress and corset, feeling a vicious satisfaction at treating them so roughly. Then she rejoined Samuel at the front of the livery. His eyes widened when he saw her. "You look good. I mean, you looked good before too, but that is more practical." Florence found herself blushing. "Thank you. How much do I owe you?" "Do not worry about it, Samuel. I cannot let you keep paying for everything. We will figure out the finances once we get to San Antonio and you find work. For now, let me do this, please." They rode on, and Florence felt better in the practical dress. She could move more easily, breathe more easily. The wedding dress had felt like a costume for a role she did not want to play. This dress felt like herself. They made good progress over the next 3 days. Samuel proved to be excellent company, always ready with a story or an interesting observation. He taught Florence how to read the stars for navigation, how to tell if water was safe to drink, how to spot the signs of other travelers on the road. In turn, Florence shared what she knew about Texas history and geography, about the plants and animals they saw. Slowly, carefully, they were learning each other. On the 4th night, they camped by a river. The air was warm and the sky was full of stars. Samuel had managed to catch some fish, and they roasted them over the fire. It was the best meal Florence had eaten in days. "Can I ask you something?" Florence said as they ate. "Anything. When you came to the church, were you scared? You could have been shot or arrested or beaten." Wallace is a powerful man. Samuel was quiet for a moment, chewing thoughtfully. "Yes, I was scared, but I was more scared of what would happen if I did not go. I kept thinking about you, trapped in a marriage with that man. I kept thinking about my mother. And I realized that some things are worth being scared for." "I have been thinking about what you said," Florence continued. "About courting properly. I know this whole situation is backwards. We ran away together before we even really met. But I would like to get to know you better, Samuel Sterling, properly like you said." Samuel's smile lit up his whole face. "I would like that too. Tell me about your dreams. What do you want to do with your life?" "I want land," Samuel said immediately. "Not thousands of acres like your Hartford. Just a small ranch, maybe 100 acres or so. Enough to run a modest herd, grow some crops, build a good house. I want to work for myself, build something with my own hands, and I want a family. A wife who is my partner, not my servant. Children we can raise together, a life that is simple but good." That sounds wonderful, Florence said wistfully. What about you? What do you want? Florence looked up at the stars, thinking. I want freedom. I want to make my own choices. I want to love and be loved, really loved, not just owned. I want to see things and learn things. And yes, I want a family too, but I want it to be built on respect and partnership, not duty and fear. We want similar things, Samuel observed. Yes, we do. They looked at each other across the fire, and Florence felt something shift in her chest. They had spent 4 days together now, talking and laughing and learning about each other. And she was starting to feel something deeper than gratitude or relief. She was starting to feel genuine affection for this kind, thoughtful man who had given her back her freedom. On the 6th day of traveling, they crested a hill and saw San Antonio spread out before them. It was a real city, bigger than anything Florence had ever seen. Buildings of stone and wood stretched in all directions, church spires reaching toward the sky. The streets were busy with wagons and horses and people going about their business. It is huge, Florence breathed. Wait until you see it up close, Samuel said with a grin. Come on. Let us find my sister. They rode into the city, and Florence's head spun trying to take it all in. The noise, the smells, the sheer number of people. Samuel navigated the streets confidently, clearly familiar with the city. Finally, he stopped in front of a neat little building with a sign that read Morrison's Mercantile. This is it, Samuel said. He helped Florence down and tied the horse to a hitching post, then pushed open the door. A bell jangled. The store was well stocked with everything from fabric to tools to canned goods. A woman behind the counter looked up, and her face broke into a huge smile. Samuel, she rushed around the counter and threw her arms around him. What are you doing here? I thought you were working up near Austin. Change of plans, Sarah. I want you to meet someone. He turned to Florence. This is Florence Newbury. Florence, my sister Sarah Morrison. Sarah was a pretty woman in her late 20s with the same light brown hair and blue eyes as Samuel. She looked between them with obvious curiosity. Pleased to meet you, Miss Newbury. Are you a friend of my brother's? It is a long story, Samuel said. Is John around? We could use some help. Sarah called for her husband, and soon a tall, friendly man with a thick beard emerged from the back room. John Morrison shook hands with Samuel and Florence. Then Sarah closed the store, and they all went upstairs to the Morrisons' living quarters above the shop. Over coffee and cake, Samuel and Florence told the whole story. Sarah's eyes got wider and wider, and John kept shaking his head in amazement. Let me get this straight, Sarah said when they finished. You met this girl one day, saw her fiancé mistreating her, and the next day you interrupted her wedding to offer her an escape. That is about the size of it, Samuel admitted. And you, Sarah turned to Florence, left your family and your home and everything you knew to run off with a man you had just met. When you say it like that, it sounds insane, Florence said. It is insane, Sarah said, but she was smiling. It is also possibly the most romantic thing I have ever heard. John, did you hear this? I heard it, and I am having trouble believing it, John said, but his eyes were kind. Miss Newbury, you are welcome to stay with us as long as you need. We have a spare room, and Sarah has been wanting some help with the store. Really, Florence said, hope flooding through her. Really, Sarah confirmed. I could use another woman's company and someone to help with the customers and the bookkeeping. It does not pay much, but it includes room and board, and it is respectable work. Florence felt tears pricking her eyes. Thank you so much. I will work hard, I promise. I do not doubt it, Sarah said warmly. Now let me show you your room. The spare room was small but clean, with a real bed and a window overlooking the street. Florence had not slept in a real bed since leaving Gonzales. It looked like heaven. I will leave you to get settled, Sarah said. Dinner is in an hour, And Florence, I think you and my brother are going to be very happy together. We are not together, Florence protested. Not like that, not yet. Sarah just smiled knowingly and left. Florence sat on the bed, her mind reeling. A week ago, she had been preparing to marry Wallace Hartford in a wedding she dreaded. Now she was in San Antonio, in a room of her own, with a job and a future that was hers to shape. And downstairs was Samuel Sterling, the man who had given her all of this by simply asking what she wanted. Over the next few weeks, Florence settled into her new life. She worked in the mercantile, learning the inventory and helping customers. Sarah was a patient teacher and quickly became a true friend. John was kind and treated her like family. And Samuel found work at a large ranch just outside the city, working with their horses. Samuel came to town every Sunday, his day off, and he and Florence would spend the day together. Sometimes they would take a picnic to one of the parks. Sometimes they would attend church services together. Sometimes they would just walk around the city, talking about everything and nothing. Florence was falling in love. She could feel it happening, slow and steady and real. Every time Samuel smiled at her, her heart skipped. Every time he took her hand to help her across a muddy street, she felt a warmth spread through her. Every time they said goodbye at the end of the day, she found herself wishing he did not have to go. One Sunday in late August, nearly 2 months after they had arrived in San Antonio, Samuel took Florence to the river for a picnic. They spread a blanket under a huge cypress tree and ate the lunch Sarah had packed for them. "I have been thinking," Samuel said as they finished eating. "About what?" "About us, about the future." He took her hand, his thumb rubbing gently over her knuckles. "Florence, I know we agreed to take things slow, to court properly, but I need you to know that what I feel for you is not going to change. I love you. I think I started loving you the moment I saw you standing on that street in Gonzales, even though I did not know what it was yet. And every day since then, I have loved you more." Florence's breath caught. "Samuel, I know I do not have much to offer. I am still just a ranch hand, still saving up for that piece of land I want. But I am a hard worker, and I will do everything I can to give you a good life. Florence Newbury, would you consider marrying me? For real this time, not because someone arranged it or paid for it, but because you want to." Tears were streaming down Florence's face. "Yes. Yes, Samuel, I will marry you. I love you too. I think I have been falling in love with you since that day you asked me what I wanted. No one had ever cared about what I wanted before. And then I got to know you, the real you, and I fell even harder. You are kind and thoughtful and brave and good, and I would be honored to be your wife." Samuel pulled her into his arms and kissed her. It was Florence's first real kiss, and it was everything she had ever dreamed a kiss could be. Gentle and passionate, tender and thrilling. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "We should probably tell Sarah," Florence said, laughing. "She already knows. She told me last week that if I did not propose soon, she was going to do it for me." They packed up the picnic and rode back to town. Sarah squealed when they told her the news and immediately started planning the wedding. "It would be simple," she declared. "Just family and a few friends, at the little church down the street." The wedding took place 3 weeks later, on a beautiful September morning. Florence wore a simple cream-colored dress that Sarah had made for her. Samuel wore his best clothes and looked so handsome that Florence's heart ached. John walked Florence down the aisle, since her own father had disowned her. Sarah served as her maid of honor. When the Reverend asked Florence if she took Samuel to be her husband, she answered with a clear, strong voice, "I do." And she meant it with every fiber of her being. They exchanged simple gold bands that Samuel had saved up for. When the Reverend pronounced them man and wife, Samuel kissed her like she was the most precious thing in the world. The reception was held in the Morrisons' parlor. There was cake and punch and dancing. Florence had never been so happy. She was married, but not trapped. She was loved, but not owned. She was free, and she was choosing this life with her whole heart. That night, in the small house Samuel had rented for them near the edge of town, he carried her over the threshold. They stood in the middle of the empty room, just the two of them, and looked at each other. "Are you happy?" Samuel asked. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Florence said. "Are you?" "More than you could imagine. I love you, Florence Sterling." "I love you too." They made love for the first time that night, and it was nothing like what Florence had been dreading with Wallace. It was tender and sweet and full of love. Samuel was patient and gentle, making sure she was comfortable, asking what she liked, caring about her pleasure as much as his own. Afterwards, they lay tangled together in the bed, and Florence thought that this was what marriage was supposed to be: partnership, love, mutual respect and care. Over the next year, Florence and Samuel built their life together. Florence continued working at the mercantile, and Samuel worked at the ranch. They saved every penny they could, planning for the future. They attended church on Sundays and had dinner with Sarah and John every week. They made friends in their community and became known as a kind, hard-working couple. Florence never heard from her parents. She wrote to them once, telling them she was married and happy, but she never received a response. It hurt, but she had made her choice and she stood by it. She had chosen freedom and love over duty and money, and she would make that choice again 1,000 times over. She did hear news from Gonzales occasionally. Apparently, Wallace Hartford had been furious about being left at the altar. He had tried to get the law involved, claiming that Samuel had kidnapped Florence, but since she was of age and had left willingly, there was nothing he could do. He had eventually married another young woman, the daughter of a neighboring rancher, and the gossip was that she looked terrified at her own wedding. Florence felt guilty about that, but Samuel reminded her that she could not save everyone. She had saved herself, and that had to be enough. In the spring of 1880, nearly 2 years after they had met, Samuel came home from work with exciting news. The ranch owner was selling off some of his land, and he was willing to sell Samuel 100 acres at a fair price. With the money they had saved and a small loan from John, they could afford it. "What do you think?" Samuel asked Florence. "Should we do it? Buy our own land, start our own ranch?" Florence threw her arms around him. "Yes, oh yes, Samuel, this is what you have always wanted." "What we have always wanted," he corrected. "This is our dream, Florence. We will build it together." They bought the land, a beautiful 100 acres with a creek running through it and good grazing for cattle. Samuel designed a house, small but sturdy, and he and John spent all their free time building it. Florence helped too, hammering nails and painting walls. She had never worked so hard in her life, and she loved every minute of it. By summer, the house was finished. It was just 4 rooms, a main room that served as kitchen and parlor, a bedroom, a small extra room, and a washroom. But it was theirs, built by their own hands. They moved in and spent their first night lying on a blanket on the floor of their empty bedroom, looking up at the stars through the window and talking about the future. "We will need furniture," Florence said, "and we need to buy some cattle to start the herd." "We will get there," Samuel said. "One step at a time. We have the land, we have the house, the rest will come." Florence rolled over to look at him. "I have something to tell you." "What?" "I am pregnant." Samuel's eyes went wide. "Truly, truly." "I am about 2 months along. We are going to have a baby, Samuel." He pulled her into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. "We are going to have a baby. We are going to be parents. Oh, Florence, I am so happy I could burst." "Me too. I am a little scared, but mostly just happy." We will figure it out together. Just like we have figured out everything else. The next months were busy and happy. They slowly furnished their house with simple, practical pieces. They bought a small herd of cattle, just 20 head to start. They planted a vegetable garden, and Florence learned to preserve food for the winter. Sarah came to visit often, helping Florence prepare for the baby. In February of 1881, Florence went into labor. It was long and hard and painful, but Sarah was there, and the midwife they had hired, and most importantly, Samuel. He held her hand through all of it, wiping her forehead and encouraging her. Finally, after 16 hours of labor, their son was born. He was red-faced and squalling, with a tuft of dark hair and his father's blue eyes. "What should we name him?" Samuel asked, cradling the tiny baby with wonder. Florence was exhausted but happier than she had ever been. "Thomas," she said, "after my father. I may not speak to him any more, but he gave me life. And Samuel for his middle name. Thomas Samuel Sterling. It is perfect. He is perfect." Samuel leaned down and kissed her forehead. "You are perfect. Thank you, Florence. Thank you for this beautiful gift." Baby Thomas was a good baby, healthy and happy. He was the light of their lives. Florence loved being a mother, and Samuel was a devoted father. They would sit together in the evenings, taking turns rocking the baby, making plans for the future. The ranch slowly grew and prospered. Samuel was good with cattle and horses, and their herd expanded. Florence kept the books and managed the household. They hired a young ranch hand to help with the work. Life was not always easy. There were droughts and hard winters, sick cattle and broken equipment. But they faced it all together, partners in every sense of the word. In 1883, Florence gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Sarah Margaret, after Samuel's sister and Florence's mother. And in 1886, they had another son, James. The house had to be expanded to fit their growing family. They added 2 more bedrooms and a proper dining room. The ranch expanded too. They bought more land and more cattle. Samuel's dream of having his own ranch had come true, and it was better than he had ever imagined because he was sharing it with the woman he loved. On a warm evening in June of 1888, exactly 10 years after their first meeting, Samuel and Florence sat on the porch of their house, watching their children play in the yard. Thomas was 7 now, a serious boy who already wanted to help with the cattle. Sarah was 5, with her mother's red hair and a fierce, independent streak. And little James was 2, toddling around after his siblings. "Hard to believe it has been 10 years, Samuel said, reaching over to take Florence's hand. "A decade," Florence agreed. "Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, and sometimes it feels like just yesterday that you walked into that church and asked me what I wanted. Do you ever regret it? Leaving your family, your home, everything you knew?" Florence looked at her husband, at the man she had taken a chance on a decade ago. His face was more weathered now, lined from years of working in the sun. His hair had threads of silver at the temples, but his eyes were the same, kind and loving and true. "Never," she said firmly. "Not for a single moment. You gave me the greatest gift anyone has ever given me, Samuel. You gave me a choice. You gave me freedom. And then you gave me love and partnership and this beautiful life. I would do it all again in a heartbeat." Samuel brought her hand to his lips and kissed it. "I love you, Florence Sterling. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. I love you too, always and forever." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. Their children's laughter filled the air. The cattle lowed in the distance. The evening breeze carried the scent of sage and wildflowers. Florence thought about the scared girl she had been, standing in her father's house in a wedding dress, waiting to be married off to a cruel man. She thought about the moment her life had changed, when a stranger with kind blue eyes had burst into a church and asked her a simple question. "What do you want?" That question had changed everything. It had given her the courage to choose her own path, to take a chance on love, to build a life that was truly hers. Now, 10 years later, she had everything she had ever dreamed of and more. A husband who loved and respected her. Children who filled her days with joy. A home built by their own hands. A ranch they were building together. Freedom, partnership, and love. The sun dipped below the horizon, and the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Samuel squeezed her hand, and Florence squeezed back. They had built something beautiful together, something real and lasting, and it had all started with a simple question, asked at exactly the right moment. What do you want? Florence had wanted love. She had wanted freedom. She had wanted a life of her own choosing. And sitting on her porch, surrounded by her family on land that belonged to them, she had all of it. The years continued to pass, marked by the changing seasons and the rhythms of ranch life. Thomas grew into a strong young man, learning the cattle business from his father. Sarah proved to have her mother's head for numbers and helped manage the ranch's finances. James, the youngest, had inherited his father's way with horses and spent hours in the stables. Sarah Morrison, Samuel's sister, and her husband John became fixtures in their lives, coming out to the ranch for Sunday dinners and holidays. The children called them Aunt Sarah and Uncle John and loved them dearly. The bonds of chosen family proved just as strong as blood. Sometimes visitors would come through, traveling cowboys or neighboring ranchers, and they would see Samuel and Florence working side by side, laughing together, clearly partners in every sense. Those visitors would often remark on it, surprised to see such obvious affection between a husband and wife, such evident respect and partnership. Samuel always smiled at those comments. "I asked her what she wanted," he would say simply. "And then I spent every day making sure she had it." Florence would add, "He gave me a choice when no one else would. That changed everything." In 1895, when Thomas was 14, he asked his parents about their story. He had heard bits and pieces over the years, but he wanted to know the full tale. That evening, after the younger children had gone to bed, Samuel and Florence told him everything. About Wallace Hartford and the arranged marriage, about the church and the dramatic escape, about starting over with nothing but hope and love. Thomas listened with wide eyes. "So you saved Mother," he said to his father. "No," Samuel corrected gently. "Your mother saved herself. I just asked her a question and offered her an option. She was brave enough to take it." "We saved each other," Florence said, smiling at her husband. "I was drowning in a life I did not want, and your father threw me a rope. But he was drifting, working ranch to ranch with no real home. We gave each other purpose and direction and love. That is what partnership means, Thomas. Not one person saving the other, but two people choosing to build a life together." Thomas nodded thoughtfully, absorbing this lesson. In 1900, when Florence was 44 and Samuel was 47, they celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. Their children, now young adults, organized a party at the ranch. Sarah and John came, of course, along with neighbors and friends from church and the business associates they had made over the years. It was a beautiful evening. Tables were set up in the yard, laden with food. Someone brought a fiddle, and there was dancing as the sun set. Florence wore a new dress that Sarah had insisted on making for her, and Samuel wore his best suit. They danced together as the stars came out, moving to the music with the ease of two people who knew each other completely. 20 years, Florence murmured as they danced. "Hard to believe." "Best 20 years of my life," Samuel said. "No regrets, not a single one. You?" Only that I did not meet you sooner, but maybe we met exactly when we were supposed to. Maybe we both needed to be who we were in that place at that time for everything to work out the way it did." Florence rested her head on his shoulder. "I used to wonder what would have happened if you had not come to that church, if I had married Wallace. Do not think about that. It did not happen, I know. But sometimes I think about that girl I was, so scared and trapped, and I am grateful every single day that you gave her a way out. I am grateful you were brave enough to take it." They danced until the moon was high, surrounded by their family and friends, their life's work spread out around them in the form of the ranch they had built together. The years rolled on. Thomas married a sweet girl from San Antonio and brought her to live on the ranch, taking over more and more of the day-to-day operations, as Samuel's back began to ache from years of hard work. Sarah surprised everyone by announcing she wanted to go to college, and Samuel and Florence supported her, selling some cattle to pay for her education. She came home with a teaching degree and opened a school in the nearby town. James married his childhood sweetheart and started his own horse breeding operation on a piece of land his parents gave him. Samuel and Florence became grandparents, and then grandparents again and again. They loved watching their children raise families of their own, loved passing down the stories and lessons they had learned. In 1910, Florence received a letter. It came from Gonzales, forwarded through several addresses before finally reaching her. The handwriting was shaky, and the paper was tear-stained. The letter was from her mother. Margaret Newbury wrote that Thomas, Florence's father, had died 6 months earlier. She wrote that he had spent the last years of his life filled with regret about disowning Florence. She wrote that she herself was dying, her heart giving out, and she wanted to see her daughter one more time before she passed. She wanted to apologize. She wanted to know if forgiveness was possible. Florence read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Samuel found her on the porch, holding the crumpled paper. "My mother is dying," Florence said. "She wants to see me." "What do you want to do?" Samuel asked, sitting beside her. There was that question again, the question that had changed her life. "What do you want?" "I want to go," Florence decided. "I want to see her. Not for her sake, but for mine. I want to close that chapter properly." They made the journey to Gonzales, traveling by train this time instead of horseback. The town had changed in the 32 years since Florence had fled, but the church was still there, and the general store and her father's ranch. Her mother was indeed dying, frail and thin in the bed that seemed to swallow her. But her eyes lit up when Florence entered the room. "My girl," Margaret whispered. "My beautiful girl, you came." Florence sat beside the bed and took her mother's withered hand. "I came. I am so sorry for everything, for not protecting you, for not standing up to your father, for choosing land over your happiness." "I know, Mama." "Are you happy? Please tell me you are happy." Florence smiled through her tears. "I am very happy. I have a good husband who loves me, 3 wonderful children, and a ranch we built together. I have everything I ever wanted. Thank you," her mother breathed. "Thank you for being braver than I was. Thank you for choosing yourself." Margaret Newbury died 2 days later with Florence holding her hand. They buried her beside Florence's father in the town cemetery. Florence said goodbye to her parents and to the girl she had been all those years ago. As they left Gonzales for the last time, Florence looked back at the church where her life had almost taken a very different turn. Samuel squeezed her hand. "No regrets?" he asked. "No regrets," she confirmed. "Just gratitude for the life we chose." They returned to their ranch, to their children and grandchildren, to the life they had built from nothing but hope and hard work and love. Samuel and Florence grew old together, their hair turning silver, their bodies slowing down. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, deepened by shared experience and mutual respect. On their 40th wedding anniversary in 1920, when Florence was 64 and Samuel was 67, they sat on their porch once again, watching the sunset. Their children had organized another party, but the guests had gone home. It was just the two of them as it had been in the beginning. 40 years, Samuel said, shaking his head in wonder. Most of my life spent with you. The best part of your life, Florence teased. Absolutely the best part. He turned to look at her, his eyes still as blue as they had been when they met, though surrounded now by wrinkles. I would do it all again, Florence. Every hardship, every struggle, every hard day, all of it was worth it to be with you. I feel the same way. You know what I think about sometimes. What? I think about that moment in the church, when you asked me what I wanted. I think about how terrified I was, but also how exhilarated. I was standing at a crossroads, and I could either take the safe, known path that led to misery, or I could take a chance on something unknown. It was the scariest moment of my life. What made you choose me? Really, Florence thought about it. It was not just choosing you. It was choosing myself. For the first time in my life, I chose what I wanted over what everyone else expected of me. You made that possible by asking the question, but I had to be brave enough to answer honestly. We have been good for each other, Samuel said softly. The best. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out, one by one, filling the sky with light. Somewhere in the house, they could hear their granddaughter playing the piano, the notes drifting out through the open windows. Samuel Sterling died peacefully in his sleep in 1925, at the age of 72. He passed with Florence holding his hand, just as he had held hers through so many moments of their life together. His last words were, "I love you, my brave girl." Florence grieved deeply, but she knew how lucky she had been. Not many people got 43 years with their soulmate. Not many people got to build a life so full of love and purpose and joy. She lived another 10 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and even great-grandchildren. She spent her days telling stories about the old days, about the Wild West that was quickly disappearing into history, about a cowboy who had ridden into a church and changed her life with a simple question. Florence Sterling died in 1935, at the age of 79. Her children buried her beside Samuel on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. The headstone read, Florence Sterling, 1856–1935. She chose love. The ranch stayed in the family for generations. Thomas's descendants ran it, then his son, then his grandson. The house was expanded and modernized, but the original 4 rooms that Samuel and Florence had built with their own hands were preserved, turned into a kind of shrine to the couple who had started it all. The story of Samuel and Florence became family legend, passed down through the generations. The tale of the arranged marriage, the dramatic rescue, the question that changed everything. Children grew up hearing about their brave great-great-grandmother who had chosen love over security, freedom over comfort, and had built an amazing life as a result. Years later, one of Florence's great-great-granddaughters would write a book about Samuel and Florence's story. It became a bestseller, introducing the world to the tale of the cowboy who asked a simple question and the woman brave enough to answer honestly. Because in the end, that is what it came down to. Not a rescue, not a romantic gesture, but a question and an answer. What do you want? And the courage to speak the truth, even when that truth was scary and uncertain. Samuel had given Florence the space to choose. Florence had given herself permission to want more than what others expected of her. Together, they had built something beautiful, a partnership based on mutual respect, genuine affection, and the revolutionary idea that a woman's desires mattered as much as a man's. Their love story became timeless not because it was easy or simple, but because it was real. It had struggle and hardship, doubt and fear. But it also had joy and laughter, partnership and respect, and above all, love. The kind of love that grows stronger with time, that weathers storms and celebrates victories, that builds something lasting. On the hill where Samuel and Florence were buried, wildflowers grew every spring. Texas bluebonnets and Indian paintbrush, covering the graves in a carpet of blue and red. Visitors to the ranch would often climb the hill to see the graves, to read the simple headstones, to imagine the love story that had started in a church in Gonzales and ended here, on land that love had built. And if you listened carefully on quiet evenings, when the wind blew just right, you could almost hear it. The echo of a question asked long ago, a question that changed two lives and created a legacy that would last for generations. What do you want? The answer was simple, then and now and always. Love, freedom, a life of one's own choosing, partnership and respect and the courage to be true to oneself. Florence had wanted all of that, and she had found it with Samuel. Together, they had proven that it was possible to build a life based on love instead of duty, on choice instead of obligation, on partnership instead of ownership. Their story ended not with wealth or fame, but with something far more valuable: a life well lived, a love well earned, and a legacy of courage that would inspire generations to come. And it had all started with a cowboy riding into a church and asking a woman promised to another a simple, revolutionary question. What do you want?